Hey, what's up guys? Joker here, and I hope you're all doing well. Today we are going to be taking an early look at the PC performance at 1080p and 1440p across 10 different graphics cards for Gears of War 5, which is coming out on September 10th, and I believe you get early access if you pre-order the Ultimate Edition, or if you have the Xbox Ultimate Pass, which you can get through the Microsoft Store now here on PC. If you have either of those, you get access to it on the 6th, which is, I believe, this Friday. So yeah, you can get it as early as Friday, but for everyone else, it's coming out on the 10th. I did get an advanced review copy, so that's how I'm able to bring you guys these numbers here today in this video. But first, today's video is brought to you by LevelKey.com, where you can save money on games for all of your favorite platforms, as well as software like Windows 10 Pro for under $16, Microsoft Office 2016 for $33, and Microsoft Office 2019 Professional Plus for under $70. And if you use my code PDS22 at checkout, you can save yourself 22% off of your Windows 10 Pro key, or you can get 3% off of the entire website with the code PDS3, or 16% off with PDS16 for any software over there, so be sure to check out the links down in the description below. So as I said, I was testing on 10 different graphics cards from both camps. We've got cards from AMD as well as NVIDIA, although there were definitely more NVIDIA cards here because I tried to stick with the current generation of cards, and well, let's just face it, NVIDIA has way more cards in their current stack of GPUs, but I did also take a look at things like at a comparison with the 1060 and the RX 580, so we're going to have something from last generation too, in case you haven't upgraded on this generation, which is probably going to be the case for a lot of people. But yeah, we'll be testing at 1080p, 1440p, of course, on the latest drivers from both NVIDIA and AMD. For NVIDIA, it's 436.15, and for AMD, it was 19.9.1, which is a press driver at this point in time, which was I guess optimized for Gears of War 5, as they gave me that driver prior to its actual release to the public, but I'm guessing that'll be live by the time the game is available to everyone else. By the time you're watching this, it might even be available for download for everyone, but that's the drivers that I was using along with my system, which is running the i7-8700K at 4.8 gigahertz, along with 16 gigabytes of DDR4 memory at 3200 megahertz. All the graphics cards were tested inside of the same exact system. Before we get into any of the actual performance numbers, I do want to take you guys through the graphics options menu, as there are a ton of options that you can tweak in here in order to be able to get the game running properly on your system. But for all of my testing, I was testing on the Ultra preset, and I did have the Ultra texture pack installed as well, which is optional from within the game menus, which is kind of different. But yeah, we're going to go through the options here. As you can see, I'm on the Ultra Quality preset. This is the exact settings that I was using, although right now I'm on a different PC with my 2080 Ti. You can see right now we are running in full screen, but of course you could do windowed and, well, just windowed and full screen. No borderless full screen for some reason. You could swap between displays on the fly from the menus, which is always nice. We've also got a full resolution scale slider, so of course you could run your native resolutions, but you can even go way beyond that. I can go all the way up to 200%, which is basically 8K at 7680 by 4320. So if that's something you want to do, I guess you can go ahead and do it. Vertical sync, as you can see, off obviously from my testing, and I did have no frame rate limit or anything put on. You can even turn the frame rate limit off for the cinematic cutscenes, and you can also adjust things like the cinematic scaling mode, which is really cool. So this is for cutscenes, which maybe normally for 21:9 would cut off at the sides. You can now set it to fill that, which may crop portions of it, but it's still nice to give you the option. If you're an ultra-wide user, you can have it fill the entire screen, so that's pretty cool. Now, we also got an FOV slider, which goes all the way up to 100, although I like to keep it at 90, and you could drop it all the way down to as low as 60 if you want to go ahead and do that. And they also do have stat counters built into it if you want, so you can actually show like frame rates and all of that stuff in the game without having to use a third-party application like MSI Afterburner. So you can see I do have the Ultra Texture Pack installed. By default, this will not be installed, and you just have to click Enter on it here. It'll install the Ultra Texture Pack, and then you have to reboot the game. But there are a whole bunch of different texture options as well, which you can customize. As you can see in here, we've also got different detail settings you can go ahead and enable, including things like animation quality, which goes even higher than this, up to the best quality. So you can go ahead and raise that up. We've also got different shadow settings, environment settings, post-processing stuff, depth of field motion blur, which I left on because it's part of the Ultra preset, but I would usually choose to run motion blur and depth of field off, which you can completely disable if you want to go ahead and do so. We've also got a sharpening slider in here, which defaults to 6 on the Ultra preset. And we've also got things like tiled resources, and you can change which GPU running if you wanted to switch to integrated graphics for whatever reason. But that is the full graphics options menu. Of course, they've got fully remappable key bindings and everything like that too. So if you want to go ahead and adjust all that stuff, it's all here. Really good, PC version of the game. They've been doing pretty good since Gears 1 got remastered and Gears 4, which came out a couple years ago as well. So a plethora of options to be able to customize graphics, audio, accessibility, controls, basically anything you could think of that you would want to customize in a game is available here in Gears 5. So that was really nice to see. As far as the actual performance is concerned, I have been extremely pleased. I have primarily been playing on an RTX 2080 Ti at 4K max settings, even with some of the settings increased, like the animation quality and ambient occlusion, which has a slider which can go all the way up to 15, which is beyond what it sets to on the Ultra preset. So even with all of that stuff pushed up as high as it can possibly go on my 2080 Ti, I've been playing at 4K and not seeing any drops below 60 frames per second. Now, I will also say that when it comes to NVIDIA and AMD, this game is heavily, and I do mean heavily, favoring AMD, as you'll be seeing in the numbers here in just a moment, to the point where a 5700 XT is almost matching an RTX 2080, which is just B-A-N-A-N. I almost spelt that wrong. Let's try that again. It's almost B-A-N-A-N-A-S bananas. There we go. I'm a little bit dyslexic today. Don't blame me for that. Doesn't change anything about how the AMD cards are performing in this. They are absolutely crushing it. Now, usually at this point in time, I love showing you guys a lot of side-by-side footage with all the different cards, but with the Navi GPUs, I was having some issues only when recording with Radeon Relive. When I was not using Radeon Relive, I didn't have any issues with stuttering or hitching. The game ran like absolute butter. However, when I was trying to use Relive to record my gameplay, it was really messing up my numbers, and the gameplay was very stuttery and hitchy. So that's something you should be aware of if you do want to use Radeon Relive with any of the Navi GPUs. I had some issues with those cards using that. That was not present, though, with the RX 580 that I did test on. So I will be showing you side by side here with the 580 and the 1060, which, as you guys know, are very evenly matched up as far as pricing is concerned when these cards, first came out, and even now today on the used market. And the RX 580 and the 1060, you'll see that it is heavily favoring the RX 580, beating it by about 10 more frames per second at 1080p, and you can buy these cards right now on the used market for like $125, and the 580 is doing an incredible job and actually ended up tying the 1660 Ti in the testing that I did, which you'll be seeing here in just a minute when we get to the average FPS and the 1% lows. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Throw up the graph here for 1080p on that Ultra preset. Again, this is with the 8700K and the 16 gigabytes of DDR4 memory at 3200 megahertz, everything done inside of the same system. And I tried to keep this in descending order, so the GPUs are maybe a little out of order as to where you would think of them in terms of price, but this is the way it's set up in terms of the actual performance, which should speak volumes to just how good the 5700 XT and the 5700 are doing. As you can see, even the 5700 is actually beating the 2060 Super, which costs about $50 more than it on reference models, beating the 2060, beating even the 2070 in this game here at 1080p. Absolutely impressive what AMD has been able to do on the Navi GPUs, and also I would assume pretty much any of their cards actually, which are handling the async compute and tiled resources very well in Gears of War 5. RX 580, as you can see, got an average of 76 FPS versus the 64 FPS of the GTX 1060. Now, there are definitely some things worth noting here, especially if you look like the frame times are like the 1% low is based off of the 1% low of all frame times captured, and then you do a math equation and you basically get an average frame rate for the 1% lows. And as you can see, it's pretty much consistent like across the board, no matter which card I was testing with, and that is just representative of how wonky the frame times were in this game. I actually talked about this back in my alpha testing, where AMD at the time had been losing in terms of average FPS, but destroying NVIDIA in terms of frame time. So I think that's what we're seeing again here, is where the NVIDIA cards, the frame times are all over the place, while AMD is staying pretty consistent. And that's why you're seeing the 1% lows for the 5700 XT, and even the 5700 has a higher 1% low than the XT, and even more than a 2080 Ti, but that's not representative of, say, the 2080 Ti is going to get lower performance. Not the case at all, as my 2080 Ti was able to manage 4K and never drop down below 60 frames per second. So the frame times are kind of wonky here for NVIDIA cards, and that's why the numbers are what you're seeing here, and they kind of look the same almost all the way across the board until you get down to like the 1060, which is all the way down at 47 average FPS. We'll go ahead and take a look at the 1440p numbers here, and again, you know, story is staying consistent from what we saw last time. As far as even matchups in terms of pricing is concerned, typically you would see the 5700 XT matched up against the 2060 Super, and it is beating it there from 75 FPS to 66 FPS. The 5700 would normally match up with the 2060, and it's beating it by 4 frames per second there in terms of the average FPS. And all of these, I shouldn't say all of these cards, but going all the way down to the 2070 here, the 2060, you're going to be absolutely fine at 1440p on ultra settings. But even the 1660 Ti, 580 and 1060 can definitely do 1440p in this game and get 60 frames per second. You're just going to want to get in there and tweak a few options, because there are a ton of options that you can tweak in order to be able to boost your performance in this game. Ambient occlusion would probably be one of the first ones that I would target, or screen space reflections. Target any of those options. You're probably going to see yourself get a decent bump in performance. So, you know, don't be dissuaded by seeing the 580 to 1060 can't run it at 1440p. This is just ultra settings with the ultra texture pack and all of that, so you can definitely tweak those in order to be able to get good performance. And I can tell you from extensively playing on the 2080 Ti that card can absolutely handle 4K maxed out 60 frames per second, as you'll be seeing here in some of the footage on this video. But that is all I have got for you guys today on Gears of War 5, where we benchmarked 10 different GPUs. Hopefully this gives you a big enough picture so you can kind of decide, you know, how it's going to run on your system based on whatever card you're using. Obviously, I can't test every single card out there, and there were just some cards that didn't really make sense to test. Things like Radeon 7, which is a dead GPU. AMD has stopped making them, and they didn't really sell that many of them to begin with. Didn't really make much sense to even bother testing a card like that. So I tried to give you a pretty wide picture of the current lineup of GPUs, at least for the ones that I have available, and then I also included the 580 and the 1060 for previous generations, so people can get a look at that and see how it's handling a modern game here in 2019 like Gears of War 5. But overall, optimization for this game is very good, especially when it comes to AMD cards on this latest driver, which is 19.9.1 as I mentioned. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Please leave me your thoughts and comments down below, as I always look forward to reading through that after the video has gone live. And yeah, I'll see you guys down there. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up on this video if you enjoyed it or learned something new. And yeah, I'll catch you guys tomorrow for another video. Turn.